The first time Mia saw the tiny wolf pup, he was trembling in a shallow ditch behind her grandparents' cabin, soaked from the rain and barely breathing. She was only 10, but something in her young heart broke wide open. He looked more like a bundle of dirty fur than a predator of the wild. Without a second thought, she pulled off her jacket, scooped him up, and whispered, "You're safe now." That moment changed her life forever. What she didn't know was that he would grow up to change the world. Mia was a quiet girl who spent most of her time alone in the mountains of Montana. Her parents had sent her to live with her grandparents after the divorce, thinking the peace and fresh air might heal her. But the silence only made her feel more forgotten. Until the wolf pup came into her life. She named him Shadow, because he followed her everywhere, like a loyal echo. People warned her not to keep him. "Wolves aren't pets," they said. "One day, he'll turn on you." But Mia never believed them. Shadow wasn't just a wolf, he was her family. They grew up together, side by side. As Shadow got bigger, so did the bond between them. He understood her moods better than any human ever had. When she cried, he rested his head on her knee. When she laughed, he jumped and spun in circles, sharing in her joy. She taught him commands, but more than that, they developed an unspoken connection, one that didn't need words. Her grandfather, once skeptical, began calling him the boy in a wolf's coat. But things started to change when Mia turned 16. Shadow began acting differently. He'd stare at the forest for hours, like he was listening to something far away. He stopped sleeping by her bed and started leaving the cabin at night. At first, Mia thought it was just instinct, maybe he was feeling the pull of the wild. But then the strange events began. It started with the local hunters. One by one, their traps were found snapped open, untouched. A mountain lion that had been terrorizing local livestock was found unconscious, not killed, just sleeping. And then there were the reports of glowing eyes watching from the trees, always too high off the ground to be any normal animal. People whispered stories. Some said a spirit protected the woods. Others claimed it was a ghost wolf, too smart to be real. But Mia knew it wasn't a ghost. It was Shadow. One night, she followed him. She waited until he slipped out into the trees, then crept after him in her boots and coat. The moon lit the path, and her breath came out in white clouds as she moved through the cold. Shadow didn't know she was there, at least she thought he didn't. He moved faster than she remembered, almost gliding between the trees, like he was being pulled towards something. Then she saw it. A clearing, lit up like it was touched by starlight. Shadow stepped into the light, and that's when it happened, his body began to shift. Not grotesquely, not painfully, but, like something unlocking. The fur shimmered, and for a brief second, he stood tall, taller than any man she'd ever seen. And then he was gone. Just like that. One blink, and the wolf she'd raised was no longer there. Mia stumbled back, heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. What had she just seen? Was she dreaming? Had she gone mad from all the years alone in the mountains? But deep down, she knew the truth. Shadow was never just an animal. He was something else, something ancient, something powerful. And now he was gone. The next morning, the local sheriff showed up at the cabin. A hiker had gone missing in the woods. Strange footprints were found around the site, not quite human, not quite wolf. Mia said nothing. Her grandparents looked at her with worry in their eyes, but she kept the secret buried deep. She had to. Because Shadow wasn't lost. He had chosen to leave. But what Mia didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Shadow hadn't vanished. He was out there, watching, protecting, waiting for the moment he would need her again. And when that moment came, nothing could have prepared her for what she would discover next. Days passed, and life slowly returned to its usual rhythm at the cabin. But Mia felt the change in the air, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Her thoughts were consumed by the image of Shadow standing in the clearing, his form shifting into something otherworldly. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened that night was tied to something far bigger than she could understand. It wasn't just the strange events in the woods that haunted her, it was the look in her grandfather's eyes. He was quieter than usual, his brow furrowed in thought, as if he were wrestling with a secret he wasn't ready to share. Mia had always admired her grandfather's wisdom, his calm demeanor in the face of the unknown, but now he seemed uneasy, unsettled. He spent more time in his study, poring over old maps and books that Mia had never seen before. One afternoon, unable to ignore her curiosity any longer, Mia pushed open the door to his study. She had been careful not to invade his space, but now something urged her to look. Her eyes landed on a stack of worn journals, their covers cracked and faded with age. Without a word, she pulled one from the pile and opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, but there was a sense of urgency in the way the words were written. It wasn't just a story, it was a warning. "This wolf has been watching for centuries," the journal read. "He is not like other creatures of the forest. He has the power to shift between man and beast, and the strength to protect or destroy. The girl who raises him will not only change the course of her life, but the fate of the world." Mia froze. The words felt too familiar, as if they were meant for her. She turned the page, her heart pounding. The journal spoke of a prophecy, one that had been passed down through generations of her family. A prophecy about a girl who would raise a wolf with the power to bridge the gap between humanity and the wild. It was said that the wolf would be bound to her, and together, they would either protect the world from a great evil or unleash its destruction. As the weight of the words sank in, Mia couldn't breathe. The girl in the prophecy was her. And Shadow, the wolf who had been by her side for so many years, was more than she had ever known. But what was this great evil? And why hadn't her grandfather ever mentioned it before? Mia closed the journal and slipped out of the study, her mind racing. She couldn't bring herself to ask her grandfather about the prophecy, not yet. There was too much fear in the air, too much she didn't understand. Instead, she decided to find answers on her own. She would go back to the clearing, back to where Shadow had shifted before, and see if she could learn more about the creature he had become. The next evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in the eerie light of the moon, Mia ventured out into the woods again. Her heart beat loudly in her chest as she made her way toward the clearing. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the forest itself was watching her. She wasn't sure what she expected to find, but she knew it was something important. Something that could change everything. When she reached the clearing, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The trees stood tall, their branches swaying in the breeze. The grass was thick with dew, and the air smelled of earth and pine. But Mia's senses were on edge. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, the same tension she had felt the night Shadow had disappeared. Something was different, something was waiting. And then she heard it. A low growl, barely audible, but unmistakable. It came from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. Mia's heart stopped as she turned, half expecting to see Shadow's glowing eyes staring back at her. But it wasn't him. The creature that emerged from the trees was like nothing she had ever seen. It was tall, its body covered in dark, matted fur. Its eyes, glowing an unnatural yellow, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her blood run cold. Mia took a step back, her breath shallow. The creature didn't move, but its presence felt like a heavy weight in the air. It was as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. In that moment, Mia realized that this was no ordinary wolf. This was the darkness from the prophecy, the evil that had been spoken of for generations. And it was here. But then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature vanished back into the shadows, leaving Mia standing alone in the clearing. Her heart was racing, her body trembling. She didn't understand. Why had it shown itself to her? What did it want? Before she could gather her thoughts, she heard a familiar sound, the soft rustling of leaves, the sound of footsteps in the distance. Mia turned quickly, and there he was. Shadow. But he wasn't the same. His eyes, those once warm, golden eyes, now glowed with an intensity that mirrored the creature that had just appeared. He was still the wolf she had raised, but something about him was different. More dangerous. More wild. Mia stood frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Was this the same Shadow she had known? Or was he something else now, something she couldn't control? The answers she sought were slipping further away, and Mia realized with a sinking feeling that she might be the only one who could stop whatever was coming. But to do that, she would have to face the darkness that now lived within the very creature she had once called her family. Mia's heart pounded as Shadow approached, his form outlined by the pale moonlight. His usual warmth, the familiar comfort of his presence, was gone. In its place was something primal, something dangerous. She took a step back, instinctively, but didn't run. She couldn't. Not when she knew, deep down, that he wasn't just a wolf anymore. He was something more. Something both ancient and terrifying. Shadow? She whispered, her voice trembling. The wolf stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing. The air seemed to thicken, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The moments stretched on in a tense silence, and Mia's mind raced. What had happened to him? Was he still the wolf she had raised? Or had the darkness, the evil she had felt in the clearing, already claimed him? A low growl rumbled from his chest. It was familiar, but somehow wrong, as if the sound itself was tainted with a power Mia could not understand. She took another step back, her pulse quickening. "I won't hurt you," she said, though the words felt hollow in her throat. She wasn't even sure she believed them anymore. Shadow's eyes flickered with something that almost looked like recognition, but then the growl deepened, and Mia's breath caught in her throat. He was no longer the playful pup she had raised, the loyal companion who had shared her life. He was a force of nature. An untamed beast caught between two worlds. Suddenly, the silence shattered with the sound of distant howls. Multiple wolves, their cries echoing through the trees, joined in a haunting chorus. Mia's skin prickled as she realized these were not the familiar sounds of the forest. These howls were wild and untethered, calling from deep within the woods. She felt it, the shift. Something was stirring in the darkness, something that was bound to her and Shadow, something tied to the prophecy her grandfather had kept hidden for so long. Mia's mind began to piece things together, her heart pounding as the truth clawed its way to the surface. Shadow was the key. He wasn't just a wolf, he was the bridge between the human world and something older, something far more dangerous. The wolves in the distance, the growl of the creature from the clearing, it was all connected. This wasn't just a wild animal she had raised, this was a guardian of an ancient power that had been dormant for centuries. And now, the power was waking. Mia took another step back, fear creeping into her chest. She had to get away, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. Her mind flashed to her grandfather's journal, the warning in the pages she had found. The girl in the prophecy was supposed to protect the world, but what if the world she had to protect wasn't just the people in it? What if it was the very balance of nature itself? What if Shadow, this creature, this ancient force, wasn't just a protector, but a weapon, one that could tip the balance in a way she couldn't control? Mia. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice, faint but clear. It wasn't Shadow's, it was her grandfather's. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, his face shadowed by the trees. "Grandpa," she called, confusion and fear rising in her voice. What was he doing here? How had he known? He stepped forward, his face drawn and tired. There was a hardness in his eyes that she had never seen before. He was no longer the gentle, wise man who had raised her. This man was someone else, someone burdened by secrets he could no longer hide. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice strained. "It's not safe here." "Not safe?" Mia echoed, her heart sinking. What's happening? What's going on with Shadow? Her grandfather didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the wolf, his gaze filled with a mix of fear and sorrow. "Shadow isn't just your companion, Mia. He's a key. A key to something much older than we understand. And those wolves you hear, they're not just animals. They're part of a larger force, one that has been waiting to be awakened. And now, he paused, his eyes darkening. Now, it's too late to stop it. Mia felt her stomach churn. What do you mean? What's going to happen? Her grandfather's eyes softened, but the fear never left them. You raised him, Mia. You gave him the love and trust that was needed to unlock what he truly is. But that love has also bound you to him. You and Shadow are connected in ways I can't explain. And now, there are forces hunting him. Hunted by people who want to control him, use him as a weapon. Mia's mind spun. She had never asked for any of this. She had simply wanted to give Shadow a life, to give him love and protection. But now, it seemed like everything had spiraled beyond her control. The wolves howling in the distance weren't just wild animals, they were a signal, a warning. What are we supposed to do? Mia asked, her voice small. Her grandfather's expression hardened again, his jaw tight. There's only one thing left. We have to find the source, the origin of the power that Shadow now holds. But be warned, Mia. The closer you get, the more dangerous it will become. Some secrets are meant to stay hidden. And there are those who will kill to keep them that way. Mia's mind raced. Her whole life had just been turned upside down. The creature she had raised, the wolf she had loved, wasn't just an animal. He was a force of nature, a weapon, and now they were both caught in a struggle neither of them understood. As the howl of the wolves grew louder, Mia knew one thing for certain, the forest was calling, and soon, she would have to answer. But at what cost? And who, or what, would be waiting for her when she did? The howl of the wolves seemed to shake the very ground beneath Mia's feet. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something darker, something that tasted of fear. The clearing felt smaller now, as if the trees themselves were closing in. Mia's heart hammered in her chest, but she couldn't look away from Shadow. His eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, seemed to pierce through her, as if they were searching for something deep inside her that she couldn't name. Grandpa, what do we do now? Mia asked, her voice trembling. The uncertainty was suffocating, and the weight of her grandfather's silence only made the tension worse. His gaze remained fixed on Shadow, and for a long moment, it seemed like he wasn't even aware of her presence. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and strained. We find the source. We have to reach the heart of the forest. That's where it all began. The heart of the forest? Mia repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. What do you mean? What's there? Her grandfather's face tightened. It's where the power was sealed, Mia. It's where Shadow's true nature was hidden. But it's also where the evil, the darkness, was locked away. The more you get closer to it, the more dangerous it becomes. The power doesn't just come from Shadow. It's tied to the forest itself. Mia's mind was reeling. She couldn't process everything her grandfather was saying. The forest, the power, the wolves, it all felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But one thing was clear, she had to go to the heart of the forest. There was no turning back. Shadow needed her, but she needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. The howls were louder now, closer. The wolves weren't just waiting anymore, they were coming. And they weren't alone. The deep rustling of branches echoed through the trees as figures moved in the shadows. Shadows that weren't made by the trees. Shadows that were alive. Her grandfather grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the cabin. We don't have time, he said urgently. We need to get to the heart before the others do. Before the darkness takes control of Shadow completely. Mia wanted to protest, wanted to question everything, but the look in her grandfather's eyes silenced her. There was no time for answers, no time for hesitation. She followed him, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. As they neared the edge of the forest, the air grew colder. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if time itself had slowed. Mia's breath came in quick bursts, her pulse quickening with each step. She could hear the wolves behind them, getting closer. But they weren't chasing them, they were closing in, surrounding them. Mia's eyes darted around, her hands trembling as she clutched her grandfather's arm. "Grandpa, what's happening?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his eyes toward the shadows, where the forest grew denser, darker. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled roots twisting like fingers reaching out from the earth. It was as if the forest was alive, watching, waiting. The howls were louder now, almost deafening, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with the force of something unseen, something powerful. "We're close," her grandfather muttered. "Stay close to me. Don't look back." Mia didn't question him. She could feel it too, the oppressive weight of something dark and ancient closing in. The air was thick with the promise of danger, and her heart seemed to beat in sync with the wolves' cries. They were close, but so was the darkness. Mia could sense it, like a shadow lurking just behind them, watching. Suddenly, Shadow was there. He emerged from the trees, his body shifting with a grace that made him look like a shadow himself. But this time, it wasn't just his eyes that glowed, his entire form shimmered, flickering like a flame on the edge of being. He was a creature of both the light and the dark, and Mia knew in that moment that he was slipping further away from her. "Shadow!" Mia called, her voice breaking. The wolf stopped in his tracks, his gaze locking onto hers. It was as if he could see her, yet he wasn't truly there. His eyes burned with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. He was still her shadow, but the power within him had grown beyond anything she could comprehend. The wolves began to converge from all sides, stepping out of the shadows one by one. Mia's breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth: the wolves weren't just hunting her. They were hunting him. They were hunting Shadow. Her grandfather stepped forward, holding out his hand. "Stay behind me, Mia," he warned, his voice steady but filled with fear. He reached for something at his belt, a small, carved pendant. "This will protect you. But we can't waste any more time." Mia felt a surge of panic. "What about Shadow?" she whispered. "What's happening to him? What do we do?" Her grandfather's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of the man he used to be before the weight of secrets had worn him down. "The bond between you two is stronger than I ever realized," he said quietly. "You're the key, Mia. You have to make him remember who he is. Only you can bring him back." But as he spoke, Shadow's form flickered again. His body rippled, shifting between man and beast. The wolves gathered around him, their glowing eyes fixed on Mia and her grandfather. It was like they were waiting for something, waiting for her to make the first move. The forest had never been so silent. The wolves were still. Mia could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, the pounding of the blood rushing through her veins. And in that silence, something else stirred. A dark presence in the heart of the forest. Mia stepped forward, her legs shaking, but her resolve firm. This was it. The moment of truth. Shadow needed her, but the danger was closing in. She had no choice but to face whatever was coming, whatever was awakening in the darkness. And she could only hope that the bond they shared was enough to keep her from losing him forever. The wolves began to move. The wolves moved in unison, their eyes locked on Mia and her grandfather, as if they were waiting for a signal. The air thickened, the tension so palpable that it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. Shadow stood at the center of the clearing, his body half man, half beast, a creature torn between two worlds. Mia's heart raced in her chest, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. But then, just as she took a step forward, a deep, rumbling voice broke through the silence. "You think you can stop this, little girl?" The words weren't from Shadow. They weren't from any of the wolves either. They came from the trees, from the very darkness that had been growing around them. Mia spun around, her breath catching in her throat. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in black, his face hidden beneath a hood. His presence was suffocating, as though the very air around him bent to his will. The wolves didn't move, they stood still, almost reverently, as if waiting for this figure's command. Her grandfather stiffened beside her, his hand gripping the pendant tightly. No, he muttered under his breath, his eyes wide with shock. Not him. Who is that? Mia whispered, barely able to form the words. Her grandfather's voice was barely audible as he spoke. The one who's been hunting us for years. The one who started all of this. His name is Elias. And he's no man. He's the keeper of the darkness, the one who controls the wolves. Mia's mind spun, trying to process what she was hearing. Elias. The one who had been hunting Shadow, and her. But why? What did he want? And why was he so powerful? Elias stepped closer, his eyes glowing with an unsettling red hue. You think the bond between you and your wolf will save you? You think love and loyalty can protect you from the inevitable? His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, but there was no warmth in it. Only cold, calculated malice. I've waited for this moment for so long, he continued, his gaze flickering to Shadow. The power that your little creature holds, it's the key to bringing this world to its knees. And you, Mia, you are the last piece of the puzzle. The girl who raised the beast. The girl who will unleash the darkness. Mia took a step back, her stomach turning. Shadow's glowing eyes flickered again, his form shifting once more between human and wolf. But this time, there was no recognition in his gaze. He was lost, completely consumed by the power Elias had awakened. No, Mia whispered, feeling the weight of his words crash over her. That's not true. Shadow wouldn't, he couldn't. Elias chuckled darkly, a sound that sent chills down her spine. Oh, but he could. He already has. Your love, your trust, has bound you together. But now, Mia, it's that very bond that will be your undoing. Shadow is the key to unleashing the true power of the forest. And once I control him, the world will fall. Mia's chest tightened. Everything she had ever believed in was unraveling before her eyes. The wolf she had raised, the creature she had loved, he was a weapon, a key to an unimaginable darkness. And now, Elias was going to use him. She turned to her grandfather, desperation flooding her. We have to stop him. We can't let Elias take Shadow. We can't let him destroy everything. But her grandfather's face was drawn with fear, his eyes hollow. It's too late. Elias has already begun. There's no turning back now. No. Mia cried, shaking her head in disbelief. There has to be a way. We can't just give up. But Elias laughed again, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. Oh, we're not giving up, Mia. We're just getting started. As he spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. The trees groaned as if responding to his words, and the wolves began to shift, their forms rippling with the same unnatural energy that had overtaken Shadow. They weren't just animals, they were part of something much older, much darker. The power of the forest was awakening, and it was no longer under anyone's control. Mia's thoughts raced as the ground continued to shake beneath their feet. She had no choice now, she had to act. Shadow was slipping further away from her, but if she didn't do something, if she didn't take control, Elias would succeed. And if that happened, everything they had fought for, the bond between her and the wolf she had raised, would be lost forever. Her eyes met Shadow's, and for the briefest moment, she saw a flicker of recognition. His golden eyes were still there, hidden beneath the darkness, fighting to break free. He wasn't gone, not completely. But time was running out. Mia clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. I will stop you, Elias, she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. I will save Shadow. And I will stop whatever dark force you think you can control. Elias smiled, a twisted, almost pitying smile. You think you can win, Mia? You think you can save him? You're nothing more than a child playing with forces you can't understand. The darkness has already claimed him. It's only a matter of time before it claims you, too. But Mia didn't listen. She couldn't. Shadow was still there, still fighting within the beast. And as long as there was hope, she wasn't going to give up. The battle wasn't over yet. As Elias raised his hands, the wolves moved in, their eyes glowing with an eerie red light. The earth shook again, this time with more force, and Mia realized with a shock that the true battle was just beginning. They weren't just fighting for their lives now, they were fighting for the very soul of the forest. And the darkness was closing in, faster than they could run. The wolves closed in, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. The earth trembled beneath Mia's feet, a low hum vibrating through her bones. Shadow stood motionless, caught between the man he once was and the monstrous creature Elias had shaped him into. Mia's heart ached as she saw the struggle in his eyes. The wolf was still there, buried beneath the layers of darkness. But Elias wasn't waiting. His hands rose, and the shadows of the forest twisted, growing, consuming everything in their path. The wolves howled, a deafening sound that seemed to shake the very air, and for a moment, Mia felt the overwhelming power of the forest itself, dark, ancient, and relentless. "Do you see now?" Elias's voice was almost a whisper, but it carried with the weight of 1,000 storms. "This is the world I will create. A world of power. A world where darkness reigns. And your little bond with the beast? It's nothing. It will never be enough to stop what's coming." Mia's body tensed, her mind racing. She had to save Shadow. She had to stop Elias. But how? The wolves were closing in, and Shadow, her shadow, was slipping away. Then, a flicker of light, a flash of gold, caught her attention. Shadow's eyes. In that moment, Mia knew he was still there, still fighting against the darkness that Elias had used to twist him. He wasn't gone yet. He could still be saved. Mia stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "Shadow, I'm here. I know you can hear me. I know you're still inside." For a brief moment, Shadow's form flickered again, his wolf-like features writhing as if in pain. His golden eyes locked onto hers, and in them, she saw the tiniest spark of recognition. The bond between them was still there, stronger than any darkness, stronger than Elias's power. "Come back to me, Shadow," she whispered, taking another step closer. "Fight it. We're not done yet." The wolves stopped moving, their eyes still locked on her, as if waiting for something to change. Elias, too, was frozen, his eyes narrowing as he watched the scene unfold. Mia didn't know how long she could hold on, but she couldn't stop now. Her grandfather's voice, barely above a whisper, reached her ears. "You have to let him see the truth, Mia. You have to remind him of who he is. You're the only one who can." Mia nodded, the weight of her grandfather's words settling over her. He was right. The only way to save Shadow was to reach the heart of their bond. She had to show him that he wasn't just an animal, that he was her friend, her protector. And somehow, deep inside, she knew that Elias could never break that bond. With everything she had, Mia called out again. "Shadow, I remember everything. I remember how we met. How you were just a lost little wolf, confused and scared, and I promised I would never leave you. You're not just a creature of the forest, Shadow. You're my family. You've always been my family." The transformation was sudden, and the change was more violent than anything Mia could have expected. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and for a moment, Mia was afraid she had failed. But then, something inside Shadow seemed to snap. His form shifted, his body trembling, fighting against the power Elias had forced upon him. "No," Elias spat, his voice venomous. "You can't win. He's mine." But Mia wasn't listening. She wasn't going to let Elias control Shadow any longer. With a final, desperate cry, she reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Shadow's muzzle. And in that moment, everything changed. The darkness that had surrounded Shadow began to crack, like ice breaking apart under the warmth of sunlight. His glowing eyes flickered one last time, and for a brief moment, Mia saw the wolf she had raised, the creature she had loved and cared for. He was back. And the bond between them, stronger than ever, had shattered the darkness that had bound him. But just as the light broke through, Elias's fury erupted. He threw his hands forward, and the wolves lunged at Mia, their eyes wild with the power he had instilled in them. It was now or never. Mia closed her eyes, bracing for impact, knowing that the moment of truth was at hand. But before the wolves could reach her, Shadow was there. His form, full of power and grace, sprang into action, faster than Mia could comprehend. The wolves recoiled, but Shadow wasn't finished. With a roar that shook the forest, he lunged at Elias, his claws flashing like lightning in the darkness. Elias's eyes widened in shock as Shadow collided with him, knocking him to the ground. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the forest, and for a moment, everything went silent. Mia stood frozen, watching as Shadow stood over Elias, his body glowing with the light of the bond they shared. The wolves had stopped, their eyes no longer glowing with malice, but filled with confusion, as if the spell Elias had cast over them had been broken. Shadow turned to Mia, his eyes softening, the golden glow dimming to its natural hue. "You did it," Mia whispered, her heart soaring with relief. She had saved him. She had saved her Shadow. But then, as the forest quieted and the last remnants of darkness began to fade, a final twist of fate unfolded. Elias, now defeated, rose to his feet, his eyes burning with fury. "You may have won this battle, Mia," he sneered, wiping blood from his lips. "But you've only awakened the beginning of something far worse. The darkness will never be gone. It will find its way back." With those final words, Elias vanished into the shadows, leaving nothing but the faint echo of his voice behind. The wolves, now free from his control, slowly scattered, disappearing into the night. Mia and Shadow stood in the clearing, the forest quiet around them. The battle was over, for now. But something in Mia's heart told her that the darkness was never truly gone. It was still out there, waiting. And one day, it would return. But for tonight, they had won. And that was enough. As the last echoes of Elias's voice faded into the night, the forest seemed to exhale. The heavy weight of the darkness that had plagued them for so long began to lift, replaced by a tentative peace that hung in the air like the soft glow of a setting sun. Mia stood still, her eyes locked on Shadow, the wolf she had raised and fought for. He was no longer the creature lost in shadow and rage. He was the same wolf who had found her as a frightened child in the forest, the same one who had protected her when she needed it most. The bond they shared was unbreakable. And now, more than ever, Mia knew that it was that bond that had saved them both. It had been stronger than Elias's dark influence, stronger than the fear and doubt that had almost torn them apart. As the night wore on, the forest began to return to its natural rhythm. The wolves who had once served Elias began to scatter, no longer under his control. Mia watched them disappear into the trees, knowing that they, too, had been freed from the curse. Shadow's fur, still glowing softly in the dim light, brushed against her hand as he nuzzled her in quiet recognition. There were no words left to say, everything had been communicated in that single, powerful moment when they had defeated the darkness together. Mia glanced up at her grandfather, who stood a few steps away, watching the scene unfold with a somber expression. His face had softened, and for the first time in what felt like years, his shoulders seemed to relax, as if the weight of the world had lifted from them. He had known this day would come, the day Mia would face the truth about Shadow, the day she would be forced to choose between the love she had for him and the forces that sought to control him. But even he had been unsure of how it would end. "We did it," Mia said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It's over." Her grandfather didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with something deeper, something far beyond the joy of victory. There was a quiet sadness in his gaze, as though he understood that the fight wasn't truly over. The forest had been saved, but the darkness was always lingering, always waiting for another chance to return. "It's never really over," he finally said, his voice low. "But you've done something important, Mia. You've shown that love, true love, can defeat even the darkest of forces. That bond you share with Shadow, it's more powerful than any curse, any darkness. Never forget that." Mia nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She had won, yes. But she also knew that the world wasn't as simple as good and evil, light and dark. Sometimes, the lines blurred, and sometimes, even the strongest bonds could be tested. But she would face whatever came next, she and Shadow together, just as they always had been. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden light over the clearing, Mia turned back to Shadow. He was lying on the ground, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes never left her. There was a calmness in him now, a peace that hadn't been there before. The battle had left its mark, but it had also brought them closer, made them stronger. He was no longer just a wolf to her. He was her partner, her protector, and in many ways, he was the family she had always needed. With a deep breath, Mia reached out and ran her fingers through Shadow's fur. She could feel the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breath beneath her touch. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. She felt like everything would be okay. But as she stood there, holding the wolf she had raised, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The forest, while quiet now, still held an undercurrent of something ancient, something dark. It was a subtle thing, almost imperceptible, but Mia knew it was there. Elias's words echoed in her mind, "The darkness will never be gone. It will find its way back." It was a warning. And though the battle had been won, Mia understood that she couldn't let her guard down. The forest, the wolves, the darkness, it was all still there, waiting for the right moment to resurface. But that was a fight for another day. For now, she had to focus on the here and now, the peace that had returned, the life she would build with Shadow by her side. Mia's grandfather, as if reading her thoughts, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done well, Mia. But remember, the forest will always need protectors. It's never about defeating the darkness, it's about learning to live with it, and standing firm against it when it rises." She turned to him, a small, resolute smile on her face. "I'll be ready." And with that, they turned toward the path that led home. The future was uncertain, yes. The darkness was still out there, still waiting. But Mia knew one thing for sure, as long as she had Shadow, as long as their bond held, they would face whatever came next, together. The forest whispered around them, the wind rustling through the trees, carrying with it the promise of both challenge and hope. Mia had learned that love, loyalty, and strength weren't just words, they were weapons, too. And with those, anything was possible.